Anu Bhadra Kratabu Yantu Vishwataha. Let noble thoughts come to us from every side. Ramakrishna Mission Stop Culture Gold Park welcomes you all to the prestigious Surrendra Memorial Lecture to be delivered by Professor Supriya Chaudhuri, a scholar extraordinary and teacher par excellence. However, as is the tradition here, let's first read out a very brief biographical sketch of Surrendra Palji, who came of a respectable Punjab family, born on December 28, 1935 in Jalandhar, Punjab. He passed the senior Cambridge examination from Vincent High School in Mussoorie, Uttarakhand, and was later sent to the US for higher studies. He had his degrees in engineering technology and management from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the US. However, having returned from the US, Surrendra Pal joined the APJ Group's family business and by 1982 took over as chairman of the group. Surrendra Pal died a tragic death in 1990. Notwithstanding his deep and intense involvement in industrial and business activities, Surrendra Pal was very much keen on promoting India's age-old values that can offer solution to many a problem facing the world today. Remembering his high ideals, a chair named Surrendra Pal Chair of Indology has been created at the Institute to encourage young scholars to study different branches of Indology. As you can see on the dais are Swami Suparnananda Ji Maharaj, Secretary of the Institute, Professor Supriya Chaudhuri, Professor Emerita in the Department of English, Jadavpur University, and Professor Shati Prasad Maiti, formerly Head Department of English, Ramakrishna Mission Residential College, Narendrapur. May I now request Professor Maiti for his address of welcome, introducing today's learned speaker to our audience and also briefly telling about the topic of the talk today. Professor Maiti.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Surrendra Pal Lecture 2023 to be delivered by Dr. Supriya Chaudhuri, Professor Emerita, Jadavpur University. It is my proud privilege to introduce this evening's speaker, Dr. Supriya Chaudhuri. She was educated at Presidency College and the University of Oxford. She has taught at the Presidency College, now a university, and Jadavpur University, where she became head of the department, coordinator of the Center for Advanced Study, and also director the School of Languages and Linguistics. She is a scholar extraordinary. There could be no doubt about that. She has held visiting appointments at Oxford, Cambridge, and Paris Sorbonne universities. Her research interests include Indian cultural history, early modern English literature, European literature, translation, modernism, and theory. Among her recent publications are her edited books, Religion and the City in India, then Commodities and Culture in the Colonial World. She has also contributed articles to learned journals like Spencer, just a minute. post-colonial studies, Spencer studies, and she has also written very substantial chapters in the Bloomsbury Handbook of Post-Colonial Print Cultures, the Oxford Handbook of Modern Indian Literatures, and the Cambridge Companion to Tagore. Incidentally, she is a very distinguished Tagore translator. She has advised nationally on research and higher education policies, and is currently on the advisory board of the National Library of India. In fact, our speaker this evening has so many achievements that detailing them would carry me far beyond the limits of time that I have at my disposal. I thank her for being with us this evening, and we are looking forward to a very stimulating talk from her. The topic she will be speaking on is the future of the humanities. I think this would be a topic very much after her heart, because over a period of decades, she has been a very extraordinary humanities teacher. She has traveled widely abroad. She has lectured at universities not only in India but also abroad. And her familiarity with the academia is very long and very deep. And she has also been associated very closely with policy making in the higher education sector at the national level for a long time. So it's my firm conviction that very few people in India would be better qualified to speak on the topic at hand than Dr. Chaudhuri. Before she takes over, I would like to say just a few words as a teacher myself on the topic, the future of the humanities. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a general perception gaining ground in many minds over the years that the future of what we call the humanities or the humanistic studies like literature, philosophy, history, sociology, psychology, is and will be at stake in a world increasingly dominated by science and technology. In fact, we live in a world where we want instant satisfaction of our immediate, practical, materialistic, consumerist needs. We are desperate in the modern world for quick results. We cannot wait. And we must have things handed on a platter immediately. Now, this is a job which science and technology can do, but the humanities cannot. Because humanities do not produce commodities. Humanities generate culture, awareness. These are things that are not marketable commodities. These are things which cannot be bought and sold. And if you look around, ladies and gentlemen, you will find that for a large number of students who have made it to higher education, studying arts or humanities has been a second choice or a third choice. And those who take to humanities are treated as second-class citizens of the academic world. They are considered to be intellectually inferior to their science and technology counterparts. That explains the rush for what we call the STEM disciplines, S for science, T for technology, E for engineering, and M for mathematics disciplines. And the continued devaluation of the humanities. Now, this is really a very sorry state of affairs for the humanities. And if this state continues, then the future of the humanities is really something to worry about. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the all-important question that we should ask ourselves at the moment is, are we going to allow our future to be decided by science and technology alone, though they are important and indispensable, and by forces of consumerism and market economy, but by forces of the higher values of life, a wider human and humane understanding of the world, and forces of culture of the spirit, which humanities generate and foster. Upon the answer to that very important question depends the future of humanity at large. For in the final analysis, humanity and humanities are inseparable from each other. It's now over to Dr. Supriya Chaudhuri, Professor Emerita, Department of English, Jadavpur University.
As the President Speaker has rightly pointed out, in view of global passionate chase for consumerism, the studies of humanities do not seem to be very encouraging, and definitely that spells danger for humanity too. But what is the way out? You are curious to know from the learned speaker, Professor Supriya Chaudhuri.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. I would like to begin by thanking the family of the late Sri Surrendra Paul, as well as the Secretary of the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, Swami Suparnananda Ji Maharaj, for inviting me to deliver this memorial lecture. It's a privilege for me to stand here before you. And I remember particularly that my late father, Sri Amulendu Dasgupta, actually was one of the earliest to deliver this lecture shortly after the lecture had been instituted in memory of Sri Surrendra Pal. I would also like to thank my classmate and friend, Professor Shoti Prasad Maiti, not only for his generous introduction of me, but for introducing the subject in such a brilliant way, leaving me really much less to do in my own talk today. I think that Professor Maiti pointed out that the subject, the future of the humanities, is one that might fill us with dismay rather than delight. Do the humanities, as we know them, have a future? This is a question that we might ask. Do they have a future in a world that is increasingly dominated by technology and science? What, in fact, are the humanities? Are they a set of disciplines confined to the university and relegated there to the least valued categories of intellectual inquiry? Or do they have a function both within and outside the university space, within the ambit of everyday life, especially cultural and social life? Let me begin by considering the humanities within the university and then move outside it. The university, this term itself suggests that it pursues universal or holistic knowledge. But within this, it tends to organize its fields of inquiry into separate disciplines, sorting those disciplines into groups, which it calls faculties, from Latin facultas, meaning capacity, skill, or ability, but also related to facilitas, meaning ease or facility. So the faculties within the university intend to facilitate distinct forms of inquiry, such as the humanities, the sciences, technology, and so on. I myself taught for most of my life at a university that had all these separate faculties. In fact, it was dominated by the Faculty of Engineering and Technology, Jadavpur University. We take these distinctions for granted, but they are not, in fact, self-evident. Moreover, they have not remained the same over time. We have to start by asking ourselves the question, what are the humanities? And this is particularly because the humanities appear to be in a state of crisis. As Professor Maiti has already pointed out, the term humanities derives from the word human. And it may be that we can only find out what the humanities are by trying to answer the question of what the human is. For the Roman rhetorician Cicero, in his oration Pro Archia, the Studia Humanitatis were those studies that formed one towards being human. And this was an aspirational goal. It was not self-evident that everybody who is born in a certain biological category is necessarily human. For Cicero, becoming human was a process of education in what he would call the humane letters, the humane sciences. Today, we inhabit what has sometimes been referred to as a post-human world, where there is much anxiety and doubt about the benefits or dangers of being human. This period that we belong to, the age that we belong to, has been described as the Anthropocene, particularly because it is believed that human beings have been responsible for a great deal of planetary destruction, that the crisis that is being faced by the planet today is largely a product of human intervention in planetary processes, global warming, climate change, oceans filled with waste, extinction of species, many animal and plant species, nuclear cataclysm, wars, and so on. All of this is believed, and understandably so, to be a result of human arrogance and human belief that it can organize and order the planet to its own profit and advantage. So there is today genuine anxiety about the privilege of the human and what it means to be human. Indeed, it is also, of course, true that as human beings, we form part of a living continuum with animal species and also with other living things like plants and so on. So, is it right for us to insist upon some kind of special privilege for our human state, or should we rather think about our interconnected lives in a planet which is, after all, not intended for us alone? Now, these problems were certainly understood by the ancients as well. Nevertheless, they did see the function of humane studies forming one towards being human as consisting in a certain branches of intellectual inquiry, which included mathematics and the sciences, as well as language, the liberal arts, rhetoric, and so on. The universe of letters for Cicero comprehends all those human arts by which we come to know the infinity of things and of nature. So, what are the human arts? They are the arts by which human beings come to know and recognize the world. Not necessarily know and recognize themselves alone, but the world of which they are part. And in a slightly later period, the Studia Humanitatis were codified into the 7 liberal arts, which were grammar, logic, rhetoric, later called the trivium, and arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, the quadrivium, that formed the curriculum of the medieval European university. Now, subsequently, over a period of time, over a period of several centuries, we find that the Studia Humanitatis, that is to say the humanities, were reduced to language, that is to say logic, rhetoric, and grammar alone. And the sciences come to form a separate strand which are no longer covered by the humanities. This is a loss, and this happens over a period of the growth of the university and its separation of the faculties of knowledge which are taught within it. Actually, the critical moment in this formation of the disciplinary division of the humanities from the sciences and later from technology, and it takes place during the Renaissance. It was during the Renaissance that there emerges a new kind of pedagogy, a new kind of teaching, focusing on the study of poetry, history, moral philosophy, and the best models of Latin style. And this leads to a split between the arts of language and those based upon mathematics and on empirical observation, the sciences. Now, over a long period of time, this distinction, this separation, comes to be enforced so strongly within the university that towards the end of the 19th century, the humanities still include the social sciences. By the beginning of the 20th centuries, the social sciences are then taken away from the humanities, and the humanities are reduced to philosophy, the arts of language, and a few other stray disciplines. The social sciences proclaim themselves as sciences, as separate from the humanities, and the science and technology disciplines have already separated off. So by the end of this process, after the sciences and the social sciences are taken away in the university curriculum from what was originally called the Studia Humanitatis, the humanities, which had originally contained all of these, becomes only the remainder. What is left after everything has been removed. It was this reduced version of the humanities that was introduced to the colonial university and promoted at the cost of the sciences, even before the self-separation of the social sciences. And the colonial liberal arts program that was taught in the colonial university, like the University of Calcutta, the University of Madras, the University of Bombay, this was, as it were, designed to produce a kind of a bureaucratic class, a clerical class that could serve the interests of the colonial power, and the sciences and technology were largely not taught at all. It was this that led to the very well-known letter written by Ram Mohan Rai to the Governor General Lord Amherst on the 11th of December 1823, urging that the natives of India be instructed in mathematics, natural philosophy, chemistry, anatomy, and other useful sciences in a college furnished with the necessary books, instruments, and other apparatus. This appeal at that time went unheard. Theoretical and experimental sciences were not emphasized in the colonial curriculum, though reformers like Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar continued to press for their inclusion, and scientific textbooks started being produced in the Indian languages from the mid-19th century. As most historians have noted, despite the establishment of a few colonial technical colleges, like for example Shibpur, Roorkee, and so on, general scientific and technological education in India was largely the result or the product of Indian, that is to say, native efforts. In 1872, Mohinderlal Sarkar proposed the foundation of an Indian Association of Science, and a searing critique of colonial power infuses Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's endorsing of this venture in a Bangodarshan essay published very soon afterwards. The Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science was ultimately founded by Mohinderlal Sarkar and Father Eugene Lafont in 1876, and the National Council of Education, with its emphasis on technical training, was founded in 1906, you remember, after the first partition of Bengal and the rise of the Swadeshi movement. Now, this is part of a large nationalist investment in science, of which another signal instance was the foundation of the Indian Institute of Science in 1899 through the active efforts of Sir Jamshedji Tata and the Maharaja of Mysore. The Banaras Hindu University was founded in 1916, also with an emphasis on technology and science. Now, what is happening meanwhile to the humanities? By contrast with this energetic pursuit of the sciences, particularly because they are seen as disciplines of power by the native Indian intelligentsia in order to, as it were, resist the colonial imposition of a liberal arts education through the colonial university, the humanities remain relatively unregarded. The humanities remain at this period an unexamined placeholder for other liberal arts disciplines, such as literature and philosophy. These areas of study, important though they were, had already been undermined by the traumatic break with pre-colonial knowledge systems instituted by the colonial university itself. What Lord Curzon described as the cold breath of Macaulay's rhetoric had laid its chill blight on literary studies in Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, and the classical and modern languages in India, while philosophy, struggling to reconcile contrary methodologies and persuasions, faced a real dilemma of practice. So you have at this point a crisis in the humanities, a crisis in what we understand by the humanities. On the one hand, there is an ancient tradition of humanities study of literature, study of philosophy, study of law, and so on in India. But as a result of the colonial intervention, there has been a kind of break with that knowledge system. And now, the remaking of those knowledge systems in the colonial model produces not so much power as a kind of subservience to European ideas or models of what literature and philosophy actually mean. So the humanities education in India at this point and even into the 20th century carries with it a real sense of uncertainty, a kind of disciplinary lack. It's worth noting that while in England in the early 20th century, there's a debate which is called the two cultures debate. So this, I think we've already talked about. I'll just move on from here. Sorry. Yes. There's a celebrated lecture by C.P. Snow called The Two Cultures, where C.P. Snow, who was a fellow of a Cambridge college, felt that the scientists were regarded as relatively awkward, unsophisticated, uneducated, by contrast by the professors of liberal arts, the humanities faculty, who were much more polished, urbane, suave, and seemed to be part of, as it were, the ruling class, the British ruling class. Now, exactly the opposite is true in India. In India, the sciences and technology carried with them the sense of a kind of power, a social status, which was never granted to the humanities. The humanities had earlier been stigmatized by the fact that they were promoted as a way of creating a clerical class by the colonial bureaucracy. Later, they were regarded as less effective, less useful in the world than the sciences and technology. So while C.P. Snow in his 1959 Reed Lectures contrasts the urbanity and culture of humanists with the social awkwardness and obscurity of scientists, in India, the science, medicine, and technology were always granted extraordinary social prestige, even a kind of glamour. And as a result, even to our own time, students who make it into illustrious institutes of science and engineering are always regarded as more intelligent, more accomplished, more likely to make good in the world than the humble humanists who study in general colleges, as they are called, who study in the general university systems, who study subjects like history and political science and literature. It is only recently that even science has woken up to the fact that it too has a problem, by contrast with the applied sciences or technology, that pure science also seems to have fallen out of favor. Even abroad, physics departments, mathematics departments are closing down for lack of students, particularly because there is this fear that these pure sciences, like the pure humanities, will not result in a high-paying job in a future in the world, and so on. So just as the humanities have been reduced to becoming a kind of placeholder for the other, what doesn't qualify as science and technology is the humanities, and those who study the humanities may manage to get a job in the media or so on, but otherwise they are not very well qualified for success in the world. Similarly, even the student of the pure sciences, physics, mathematics, chemistry, and so on, even such a person is regarded now with considerable anxiety and disfavor, because it's an anxiety about exactly what use such the pure knowledge of the sciences can be put to. Now, perhaps we need to understand why we need, at this point, having placed the problem like this, we need perhaps a hermeneutic lever to unlock this impasse. And I'd like to turn to the philosopher Immanuel Kant, who wrote at the very end of the 18th century, he was actually Kant, although he is such a well-known philosopher, was in fact all his life very much a part of the university system, and he was twice rector of the Albertina University in Königsberg, modern Kaliningrad. He wrote a book called The Conflict of the Faculties, which was his last work, actually. And there he examined the relation between what he called the higher faculties in the university, theology, law, and medicine, and the lower faculty, philosophy. Philosophy is always part of the humanities, and Kant is coming to the problem of the humanities from the perspective of philosophy. Now, Kant says that within the university, law, medicine, and theology are regarded as high, and philosophy is regarded as inferior. But Kant suggests that there is a function for philosophy, there is a function for the humanities, and this function is an important one for the university in general. So he says that whoever it was that first hit on the notion of the university and proposed that a public institution of this kind be established, it wasn't a bad idea to handle the entire content of learning by a division of labor, so that for each branch of the sciences there would be a public teacher or professor appointed as its trustee, and all of these together would form a learned community called a university. The university would have a certain autonomy, and it would be authorized to pass judgment on scholars through its faculties, smaller societies, each comprising the university specialists in one main branch of learning. And he said that in addition to the academics within the university, there could also be scholars at large, who are the intelligentsia, who are formed by the university and, having learned from the university, can communicate their skills to the larger body of the people, of society. Now, he says that within the university, it is of course important to have these higher faculties, law, medicine, and theology. And what characterizes these faculties, he says, is that very largely what they teach is very regimented, it is already known, and it is regulated by certain rules. It is as though what you learn in the faculty of medicine or of theology or of law is already codified. It's already codified, it's already very much not the production of anxious inquiry within the classroom. It is something that you are taught and that you have to follow. But he then goes on to say that it is absolutely essential that the learned community at the university also contain a faculty that is independent of the government's command with regard to its teachings. One that, having no commands to give, is free to evaluate everything and concerns itself with the interests of the sciences, that is, with truth. One in which reason is authorized to speak out publicly. Now, I think Kant is really grappling with a big problem here, which he resolves in a very interesting philosophical way. He says that the other branches of learning, in a sense, what they teach, what they promulgate, is, in a sense, it's already known, it's already decided, to some extent it's predetermined. If they teach the law is already there. They don't make the law. They don't criticize the law. They teach the law. They don't make up new medicine. They teach the medical principles, which are already known. Therefore, there's a great deal of control over what these faculties can teach. But it is absolutely necessary that within the university there should be another faculty in which reason will hold supreme, in which we will learn to criticize, to understand, to evaluate what we know or what we can learn. This, he says, is the task of philosophy. Philosophy must teach us how we know what we know, why we know it, what is its application, what can we make of it. So he says that it is the task of philosophy to pursue reason, to evaluate the nature and principles of knowledge, and to speak truth to power publicly. There may be, he says, legitimate conflict between the faculties, but the conflict is illegitimate if members of one faculty try to exclude others from rational debate. The function of the humanities is to provide a critical corrective to the operation of the more rule-bound dispensations of knowledge. The philosophy faculty, despite its lesser status, remains the source of free, rational, and dispassionate inquiry, even in the most authoritarian of state regimes. Thus, Kant, himself a philosopher, working under a benevolent despot, in his time in 18th century Germany, when he publishes his critique of pure reason, he faces censorship, he sees the task of the humanities faculty of philosophy as one of critical reasoning, one of critical thinking. And this is a point being made by philosophers, by writers today, both within the university and outside the university. And it's an argument that very strongly is made in the humanities faculty, and to some extent, of course, it is taken up by scientists, by people pursuing technology and other disciplines. But the difference here is that the question, the criticism, is not part of their disciplinary activity. As a scientist pursuing physics, it is not the task of the physicist to ask questions of this kind. But it is the task of the humanities faculty to ask questions about the nature of knowledge, about how we can know what we know, why we pursue these branches of knowledge and not others, what good it does to us, what use it is in this world. And this problem of knowledge and its reach and use is one that has been addressed by other writers today. I've mentioned Kant, but I'm now turning to to J.M. Coetzee, the writer, who says that all over the world, as governments retreat from their traditional duty to foster the common good and reconceive of themselves as mere managers of national economies, universities have been coming under pressure to turn themselves into training schools, equipping young people with the skills required by a modern economy. Now, Coetzee is saying that the decline in the humanities is particularly because the university is now regarded only as a kind of management school. It's as though the university, which was originally the place of reason and debate, the place of thinking and the pursuit of knowledge for its own end, is now understood as simply a kind of training school where students will be equipped with the skills to survive in a modern economy and to contribute to the profit-making capacities of that economy. Coetzee suggests that the crisis that the university faces is really a crisis in understanding what the humanities are and what they are for. The transient needs of the economy are not the needs that are imperative or important to the humanities. He says that these are not the needs that should drive higher education. A humanistic education provides a kind of critical literacy, which is the capacity to argue, to interrogate, and to unsettle the structures of social and political life. Coetzee sees it as an important task for universities to fulfill, but he says that in fact universities seem to have given up on this task. The fact is that the record of universities over the past 30 years in defending themselves against pressure from the state has not been a proud one. Few academics appreciated the scale of the attack that was being launched on their independence and the ideological passion that drove it. Resistance was weak and ill-organized. The professors beat a retreat to their dugouts, from where they have done little besides launching the intermittent satirical barb against the managerial newspeak they are having to acquire. So what Coetzee is so pessimistic about is the fact that the university seems to be surrendering its claim to pursue higher knowledge for its own end. That the university seems to surrender to the task of basically being a kind of vocational training ground. You know, teach the students the computer literacy, other kinds of soft skills, which will enable them to get along in the world. Don't teach them to think, to argue, which Kant had said is the task of philosophy, is the task of the humanities. Coetzee goes on to say that the campaign to rid the academy of what was variously diagnosed as leftist, anarchist, etc., has continued without let-up for decades and has succeeded to such an extent that to conceive of universities any more as seedbeds of agitation and dissent would be laughable. Well, maybe not quite laughable in India, but still it is true that there is a general sense that the university also must come under some kind of general regulatory framework where independent thinking and independent research and pursuit of knowledge is generally discouraged. The threat to the university is not just from the loss or attenuation of traditional knowledge disciplines, but from their substitution by skill sets, which are claimed as transferable even without disciplinary foundations. So I think that what we need really to understand in this situation is that philosophy and humanistic studies are required in order to keep the university alive and to keep its function alive in a rapidly modernizing world. The idea of the university is one that seems to depend upon the survival and the future of the humanities. This is Habermas on the idea of the university. I will not spend too much time on this. Let me just turn on this, yes. Now, Habermas says that the great point about the university and the idea and the benefit of philosophy is that the doors stand open, and at any moment a new face can suddenly appear, a new idea can unexpectedly arrive. How could we allow such new ideas and such new faces to appear? Now, I think that it's important to understand that the modern university in India has been driven by three factors: colonial education policy, nationalist experimentation, and the patronage system of old and new philanthropy. The process involves different kinds of interventions in the public sphere. In some cases, the foundation of a new university in India was led by charismatic philanthropic figures. In some cases, they were directly opposed to colonial education policy. For example, the National Council of Education, which led to the birth of Jadavpur University, or Rabindranath Tagore's Vishwabharati. Modern higher education has been ceaselessly critiqued, and new models of humanistic education have been upheld, particularly, I would suggest, by Tagore's idea of Vishwabharati. Subsequent to independence, these universities came to depend upon state funding rather than upon upon private philanthropy or even public charity. As a result, very often we find that the university becomes detached from the research foundation. Research is taken over by independent research institutes, and the university simply becomes a large kind of factory to produce degree holders. And that too leads to the destruction of this power or this capacity for critical understanding and critical inquiry. Subsequent to independence, the humanities survive in our post-independence universities as a means of mopping up the social energies and interests of a vast amorphous majority of university entrants, unsure about their own futures, never mind those of their academic disciplines. And yet, the public university remains the only free, democratic, and open space in India that was created after independence, where all classes, castes, and genders could mix and exchange knowledge. It is important, therefore, to ask how, in this somewhat chaotic situation, the humanities can prosper and develop, and whether the humanities can still function after these crises that it has experienced and gone through, whether it can be a site of critique, whether they can be a site of critique and resistance. This is particularly important to ask because, as we know, the idea of the human and the ideology of humanism have been almost continuously under attack for a couple of centuries now. So we find that while during the European Renaissance and immediately afterwards, there was a kind of overvaluation or overprivileging of the human, and particularly through its most signal achievement of the new philosophy, the scientific revolution of the 17th century, we find that subsequent to this, there is a new anxiety about what it means to be human and whether being human has separated us from the rest of nature. I think that it's time now to reassess the humanities and how they can be put to use. In our post-human condition, we cannot simply say that the humanities are those studies that form us towards being human. Rather, we are aware that our species condition, such as it is a condition of profound dependence on other constituents of our world, so that we are not human in and for ourselves, but by and for others. If there is a set of disciplines called the humanities, they should enable us to ask questions about the interdependence of humans, other animals, and machines, as indeed of the interconnectedness of the entire natural world and our activity within it as agents and as receiving subjects. There was a certain hubris in believing that human beings were separate from the natural and animal world. To ground the humanities in the notion of humanitas is therefore no longer a tenable move. In our own time, we need to evolve towards what we might call the new humanities. The new humanities, and this is a term that is gaining ground in higher studies today, the new humanities cover topics ranging from human ecology to statistical probability to censorship to law to biological humanities, medical humanities, and so on. The new humanities are impossible without the cooperation of science and technologies, but they are, insofar as such divisions can be made, a distinct field of study in that they offer the space to reflect on the pursuit of life itself and how we can live more attentively, paying more heed to the conditions of life within which we operate. For life for us is not just our life. It is also the lives of others, of other species and kinds. It is dependent, as it has never been before, on technological supplements, on on everything that makes modern human life possible. And we know that just as I can't see without my glasses, so too, there are many activities of life that are impossible without the kind of prosthetic supplement which is provided to us by science and technology, and that is happening all the time. Therefore, if the humanities are asking questions about what it is to live, what it is to operate in the world, how we can make our lives better for others as well as for ourselves, then we can ask these questions only by taking on board all those other disciplines that at some point in the evolution of the arts and sciences had become excluded from the humanities. So what I started by saying was that at one point the humanities included everything that human beings knew about the world. It included mathematics, astronomy, music, science, and everything else, literature, law, etc. At some point, the humanities were marked off as being those basically arts of language, writing, literature, maybe a bit of philosophy, but nothing else. Other things were economics, which is part of the social sciences, history, which also claimed to be part of the social sciences, and science and technology, which were regarded as no longer part of the humanities. What I'm trying to say now is that while the humanities always had a function in having this capacity to ask questions and to put, as Kant said, the other disciplines through a process of interrogation, the new humanities needs again to collect all the disciplines together. The new humanities needs to understand that it is no longer able to survive on its own. It has to become part of which is why you have these new disciplines called medical humanities, legal humanities, ecological humanities, and human ecology, and so on. Because, in a sense, the new humanities are a way of asking how, in this deeply interconnected world, how is our life or the lives of others, how are these lives possible at all? And they also, of course, they ask questions proper to the conduct of life, questions of ethics, of sympathy, of communication, of how we know what we know and why we believe what we believe. So the humanities were, as Kant said, the discipline of philosophy was where you ask that question, that if you say, I believe this, why do you believe it? Why do you believe it? Why? How can you say you believe it? On what ground do you say you believe it? Indeed, it might even ask you, who are you? Who is this I who you say believes in something? Philosophy could legitimately ask the question, how do you constitute yourself as a person? Am I a person, or am I by myself, or am I a person made up partly of the thoughts and emotions and feelings of others? Am I entirely a separate being, shielded, as it were, by a kind of envelope of skin? Or am I a permeable structure whose mind has been influenced by other thoughts, the thoughts of others, and also by other events, like the world in which I live, on the ground on which I stand, the air that I breathe, and so on. So these are universal questions. The last two, the question of the ground on which I stand and the air that I breathe, are questions that belong to the hard sciences as well. The hard sciences are also asking me, who is this person who is making a judgment about where I am, what I believe, what I see, what I can be sure of, or what I am not sure of. It is from the hard sciences, we might say, that we have learned a certain technique of asking questions and proving answers, which is crucial to the humanities per se. It might be said that it is from mathematics and physics, or perhaps something else, that we have learned how to ask for proof in a certain demonstration. We may say that it is not that the humanities taught this, perhaps we were taught this by the sciences. But the humanities do enable us to ask other questions too, about justice, about freedom, and to ask them in a way that recognizes the brevity and uncertainty of life. And that too is a point, that the hard sciences often ask questions in a way that suggests that we are immortal, that we are not, transient creatures here in this world, briefly asking this question and looking for an answer. The hard sciences, which claim the universality of the laws that they prove, ask these questions in a way that takes no account of the brevity of human life and the impossibility of arriving at certain knowledge. Whereas in the humanities, we are always confronted by this sense of the brevity of life and the problems of the inequality of those conditions, and indeed the transience of the conditions within which we operate. We cannot ask these questions in isolation from, let us say, a mathematical conception of equality or an economist's notion of freedom. For example, Amartya Sen's The Idea of Justice asks very interesting questions about what justice is. It asks them in a way that is suited to the pursuit of the humanities, but you might say that the fact that he can ask the question in that way is because he is trained as an economist. I would like to suggest that our lives today as individuals, as political beings, as users of technology, as role players, make it impossible to consider literature, philosophy, the arts, history, sociology, what we call the humanities, as sealed off into their linguistic or discursive compartments. Rather, to study one is to be touched by all. We cannot achieve a fully interdisciplinary state. But the humanities disciplines need to allow themselves to be transformed from within, to acknowledge the relation of philosophy with biology, literature with ethics, politics with technology, culture with informatics, and so on. So that the new humanities is a way of thinking the future of the humanities. This future has to be debated both within the university and outside the university. The university is maybe a testing ground for the function of intellectual labor in society that may be less democratic, less equal, more fractured, more impoverished than we had hoped it would be. But within these realities, this debate must also continue outside the university. The future of the humanities is a future on which our lives and our ability to function as rational intellectual beings depends. It also, of course, is a future on which our lives depend in terms of the enjoyment of life and our pursuit of happiness. You may remember that Bertrand Russell wrote a book called The Pursuit of Happiness. And there he seemed to suggest that philosophy asks this question, so do the arts. The arts ask us, what does it mean to be happy, to enjoy life, to do good, to be a good influence in society for others? The arts ask these questions incessantly, and they try to move towards certain kinds of approximate, maybe not, at no point can they be determined answers. And this is because for all that science and technology makes or may make our lives better or more comfortable, one will always ask, what do they make us comfortable for? And you might say, well, they make me comfortable in order to read a book, enjoy some music, watch a film, view an artwork. So presumably, it is these that are making life worth living. And these then, the production of such culture it's not the only task of the humanities. The function of the humanities is to ask how all of these elements of human life come to be related together and come to support and vivify each other. So the humanities then are a means of thinking the future, thinking about the future, and making a future for human life. Thank you.
Our grateful thanks to Professor Chaudhuri for her intellectually stimulating talk that ends with a note of optimism. It is not all over for all that doesn't qualify as science and technology. And she is very hopeful that ultimately human ignorance will lead to human goodness. And also she gives certain valuable suggestions for the managers of education. Thank you, ma'am, for your brilliant talk. May I now request our Secretary Maharaj to formally propose vote of thanks that will mark the end of today's program.
Om Jananing Sharadang Deving Ramakrishnam Jagat Gurum Padapatmitayo Sritva Pranamami Muhurum. Like most of you, I also used to think before coming to this hall for listening to Professor Chaudhuri that we would be all in a mess because we would not be able to understand the topic itself. It may go out of our understanding. That was my feeling in the beginning. But when I started listening to her, I was amazed to see that these are the problems facing us every day. Every day. I can just cite two examples. So one teacher of physics entered the class of, entered the room of, entered the classroom of class 7 to teach the laws of motion by Newton. He started teaching that day the third law, that is actions and reactions are equal and opposite. Very, very, very known to all of us. Then the best boy in the class was found disturbing. And after repeated warnings even, the boy could not come to his senses. What happened? When the next time he started creating trouble for the class, the teacher went up to him and slapped. And the boy was waiting for that very moment. Then he just wanted to know very humbly, said, this is your action. What reaction do you expect? Equal reaction. The teacher retorted, have you forgotten that I have been teaching the properties of matter? The boy replied back, is there matter only in the universe, sir? I am asking you to tell us this all, the properties of man. You scientists, you have defined every object in the universe living aside you. Can you tell me what are the things, what are the qualities that you should possess in order to be called a human being? Have you ever defined a human being? You have defined this, you have defined this, you have defined light, water, earth, air, space, everything you have defined. Why did you leave out human beings? Can you tell me? I do not know. But all along, for generations together, you have been teaching that you are, you have to read the properties of matter. Properties of matter, it never occurred to your mind that the vast sentient world of this earth, vast sentient part of this earth, and the most important substance is human being. And you leave them out completely from your consideration. How is it? Can you tell me? Well, no. I do not know offhand, but I will try to collect the answers to your question within a week. And he went everywhere but could not find even a person to tell him. Then the boy, I got it from my grandfather. It is this, that you have to qualify some of these. You have to know certain things. You have to live certain qualities. What are these qualities? You have to be non-violent first. The violence is a quality of a beast, animal. You are different from animal. So you have defined animal, but you have to define human being by putting down all the qualities, all the qualities on the contrary of the animals. Okay. That they do not observe any cleanliness. So is a condition, very much, for a human being to exist. Then Sanjam, Sotto and non-stealing, sticking to truth. These are the 5 things that a human being must emulate. This we all know. Even you people, you do not know what are the conditions, what are the qualities that we should have to be called a human being. We know only the universe around us. Who am I? We do not know. We know what is there outside me. That is the first thing. This is our problem. And the second problem that Professor Chaudhuri is the pure humanities and pure sciences. They could even be bracketed as inferior faculties. And of course, another concept, the new humanities, like medicine, this and that, it's impossible without the cooperation of the pure science. That is a fact with all of us now. You ask your sons and daughters who are living in the West. At least I know all of them, and they have confided to me. When I ask them, can you make use of the education that you had here in your research activities? Well, no, absolutely no. So you are a first-class statistician, first-class physicist, first-class chemist, first-class mathematician. What are you doing there as your research activity? Well, we are very sorry to state that. I had full knowledge, almost full knowledge of statistics. I did very well, securing gold medals in both degree and postgraduate from ISI. Now, what I am doing there, I have been asked to find out what is happening to the brain cells at the left side lower part of your brain. Innumerable brain cells are there. I have to expose myself to MRI per day 15 to 20 times. That's exposure, because costly for me, because very detrimental effect. But still I have to do it. And this should be made use by medical sciences. Similarly, mathematician, first-class mathematician is doing researches on biomathematics, biostatistics, biophysics. Everybody, unless your research activities would have any connection with the utility aspect of people, we won't spend anything on you. That is it. So utility, that has become prayojan. It is a necessity. And if there is no necessity of your learning, then that learning has to be on the end. That learning has to go out of this universe. There is no need of it. প্রয়োজনের জগৎটাই হয়েছে আমাদের সবচেয়ে বড় জগৎ। আমাদের সমস্ত ব্যাপারটা এইখানেই আটকে আছে। we have to feed our body, yes, but we are giving excessive importance to body alone. We do not take care of our mind. We do not listen to a song. We do not know how to sit idle for an hour or so. Without any engagement, you cannot sit idle. Leisure is a must. You have to maintain a balance between leisure and work. Rabindranath Tagore says, "Vishramera jeno kaje rango." Leisure is a very important part of work. We forget that. Open space we don't want. Everything is for necessity. That is the problem. So pure science and pure humanities almost both of them have lost their royal place. We know, but who would say, who would listen to? Because every concern, every part of our education system is looking out for profit. So we have to abide by that decision. It is coming from the high up. So we are just the scapegoats. Anyway, Professor Supriya, we are very much indebted to you for inciting the issue. At least a handful of listeners present in this hall would carry the message in their hearts and try to propagate it among their friends and children even, that we should not be guided by the principle of necessity alone. We have to listen to the feeble voice of our conscience. I thank Professor Chaudhuri, Supriya, for agreeing to speak on this important occasion. And I thank Professor Suti Prasad Maiti. As you have heard from Professor Supriya Chaudhuri, Suti Prasad Maiti and she herself both were students of Presidency College, also good friends. And when I requested Swati Prasad to be in our midst to introduce Professor Chaudhuri, he readily agreed. I thank both of them, and I thank you all for your patience listening. Thank you.